Hello from the Channel Studio in London and welcome to another edition of Foreign Dispatches, the programme that takes you around the world in 25 minutes. I'm Tenyola Uyetayo. On the programme this week, chaos in Kenya as anti-tax protesters storm parliament. And as more people flee conflict in Sudan, resources are stretched to the limit in neighbouring countries like South Sudan. Kenya was left in chaos this week after scenes in Nairobi saw parts of parliament ablaze and gutted. Protests over proposed tax hikes turned deadly, prompting the government to deploy the military. As tensions boiled over on Tuesday against proposed tax hikes, several protesters were killed outside the Kenyan parliament. Inside, lawmakers had, at its second reading, approved the contentious finance bill that seeks to raise $2.7 billion in revenues. Opposition to the legislation had brought thousands onto the streets across the country. Police were overwhelmed by protesters as they attempted to storm the parliament compound. Flames could be seen coming from inside. Police opened fire after tear gas and water cannons failed to disperse the crowds. The protesters opposed tax rises in a country already reeling from a cost of living crisis. Many are now calling for President William Ruto to step down.
I'm an Uber driver and I'm supposed to be working right now. I have children whom I work for, and this bill has to fall for Kenya to have peace. Please, Ruto must go.
We are crying, and we are really crying. We are really crying as citizens. We are really crying. Drop the finance bill. Drop it. Drop it. It is going to kill us. It is taxing us so much. We don't have anything. We are young boys suffering on the streets. Help us, President. Help us.
In an address on Tuesday evening, the president said his government would use all means at its disposal to prevent a repeat of the violence.
I assure the nation of the government's determination to fulfill its constitutional duty of protecting the people of Kenya against all forms of harm. I hereby put on notice the planners, financiers, orchestrators, and abettors of violence and anarchy that the security infrastructure established to protect our republic and its sovereignty will be deployed to secure the country and restore normalcy. It is not in order or even conceivable that criminals pretending to be peaceful protesters can rain terror against the people, their elected representatives, and the institutions established under our Constitution, and expect to go scot-free. We must isolate crime from democratic expression and separate criminals from people exercising the freedom of expression and divergent opinion. I shall continue to lead a government that is fully committed to maintaining the integrity of our state, promoting the unity of our nation, and enhancing the peace and security of all citizens and their livelihoods. I am bound under sacred constitutional mandate to respect, uphold, and defend the Constitution of Kenya, which declares that all sovereign power belongs to the people, and that this power shall be exercised only in accordance with the Constitution. The government will therefore uphold its constitutional mandate to secure our nation and its development, and shall treat every threat to national security and the integrity of our state as an existential danger to our republic.
The next day, President Ruto bowed to pressure and said he would withdraw the finance bill containing the unpopular tax proposals.
Listening keenly to the people of Kenya, who have said loudly that they want nothing to do with this Finance Bill 2024, I concede, and therefore I will not sign the 2024 Finance Bill, and it shall subsequently be withdrawn. And I have agreed with these members that that becomes our collective position. I will be proposing an engagement with the young people of our nation, our sons and daughters, for us to listen to them. As I said on Sunday, listen to their views, listen to their proposals, their ideas, their concerns, and what they think we should do better as we go forward.
The proposed legislation was part of efforts to cut the country's massive debt burden of more than $80 billion, which costs the country more than half of its annual tax revenues to service. President Ruto has been caught between the competing demands of the population and lenders like the International Monetary Fund, which is urging the government to cut deficits to access more funding. With no end to the violence in Sudan, millions of people have been forced to flee to neighboring countries, including South Sudan, where at least 1,000 people still cross the border daily. Conditions in the refugee camps are dire, with limited access to water, healthcare and hygiene facilities. Over 1,000 people are now arriving at this transit center daily in South Sudan's Upper Nile state, near the Joda border with Sudan. Most are South Sudanese returning refugees who had been living in Sudan since fleeing South Sudan's own civil war. Originally built to accommodate 4,000 people, more than 13,000 people are now living in and around the transit center in increasingly difficult circumstances. Babakar Suleiman and his family arrived in Rank in December 2023 to escape fighting in El Fasher in Sudan's Darfur region. The Sudanese family of 13 live in a communal shelter with 2 other families at the transit center. Life here may not be ideal, but Babakar says his priority was to get the family to safety.
We met people in the street who said they saw civilians being killed in front of them. The fighting between the army and the paramilitary, RSF, continued for months and claimed many lives. It took us nearly 4 months to get out of El Fasher. But later on, my mother, who has heart problems, started getting sick. So we decided to leave home.
9 million people have been displaced since war broke out in Khartoum, making Sudan the world's biggest displacement crisis. With no choice but to flee their homes, many leave their belongings and jobs behind them, often becoming separated from their loved ones.
I was thinking a lot about my children and how to protect them and get them out of the conflict. I wanted to find a safe environment where they can be safe and have enough food. It has been tough for us, especially for the kids. I told them to be strong and patient, hoping we will find peace someday.
UN High Commissioner for Refugees Filippo Grandi was in rank recently, where he met families displaced by the conflict who shared the difficult experiences they went through escaping. The arrival of large communities of people has increased pressure on communities hosting them.
At the peak of the emergency last year, 4,000 people per day were going through rank. Now this figure has decreased, but there is still about 1,000 people a day. Imagine 1,000 people a day arriving in a rich country. It would be a huge problem. And yet here, South Sudan keeps its borders open and the local community welcomes the people that are coming, in spite of the burden that they represent, of the resources that they need to be kept here. I'm here during the week of World Refugee Day to say, don't forget the refugees from Sudan. Don't forget the neighboring countries, Chad, Central African Republic, South Sudan, Ethiopia, Egypt, that are all generously receiving people, but that are facing challenges of their own. Here in South Sudan, a country that has seen 2 civil wars in 10 years, and which is still emerging from this conflict, this crisis, this arrival of hundreds of thousands of returnees could be very destabilizing.
Escalating violence in El Fasher and reported atrocities against civilians in Al Jazeera state are driving yet more people to flee.
Without swift action, Sudan risks becoming engulfed in more ethnic violence and fragment even further. The risk of a conflict spillover remains high. From 16th April to 9th June, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights documented at least 192 civilian deaths in El Fasher. Since then, dozens more civilians, including women and children, have reportedly been killed. Civilians are in the line of fire. Nowhere is safe for them. A ceasefire in El Fasher is needed now to prevent further atrocities, protect critical infrastructure, and alleviate civilian suffering. It could and should also pave the way for a broader scale cessation of hostilities.
Calls from the United Nations and the international community have grown in recent weeks to prevent Sudan from falling into a humanitarian catastrophe that could push millions into starvation due to food shortages caused by fighting that has spread to 12 of the country's 18 states.
We are in the race against time to avert massive loss of life and in this unprecedented protection and food security crisis in Sudan. We have 3 asks: to protect civilians and the infrastructure they need for survival, to ensure unimpeded, sustained, and expanded humanitarian access to people in need, and increased funding for the aid operation. But let me be clear. The ultimate ask is for this horrific conflict to stop.
The prolonged conflict in Sudan has created one of the world's largest humanitarian crises, with millions facing famine and lacking essential health services. The crisis has a catastrophic impact on lives, dignity, and human rights of women and girls. We reiterate the call for an immediate ceasefire across Sudan and full compliance with the arms embargo in accordance with relevant Security Council resolutions.
All the way from there to UNICEF.
UNICEF says Sudan is one of the worst places in the world for children, with millions facing malnutrition and most not in school. The pillars of Sudan's food economy have collapsed, and both warring parties, the Sudanese army and a paramilitary group called the Rapid Support Forces, are restricting the delivery of desperately needed aid. When Foreign Dispatches returns in just a moment, Rwanda gears up for July 15 presidential elections. Please stay with us. Campaign season has officially begun in Rwanda as citizens prepare to head to the polls in July. During a speech at a campaign rally in Musanze, President Paul Kagame underscored the region's turnaround from a post-genocide insurgency zone into a thriving tourism destination. This transformation was made possible through the Rwanda Demobilization and Reintegration Commission and the Rwanda Development Board. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Amarachi Ubani, visited the RDRC to update on progress regarding ex-combatants returning home to Rwanda.
Established in 1997, the Rwanda Demobilization and Reintegration Commission was set up to support, design, implement, and administer the Rwanda Demobilization and Reintegration Program for ex-combatants or ex-members of armed groups who want to return to Rwanda and be reintegrated into society. The center where the program is provided is located in Mutombo, in Musanze, where former members of the defeated army and genocidal militia reorganized in the Democratic Republic of Congo and launched targeted and terror attacks. It was opened in 2001.
The program targets all ex-combatants irrespective of their military background. Someone who returns from the FDLR, someone who was demobilized from the RPA, someone who was demobilized from the Rwanda Defense Forces, they will get the same support, they will get the same treatment, they will be treated equally and have equal opportunities throughout the whole process and even out there in the civilian life.
According to Mr. Musoni, host communities where the ex-combatants are sent to are made fully aware that they will be receiving these new guests and are sensitized to be supportive.
Communities are fully aware that they are going to be receiving ex-combatants, and they are not only aware, but they are also sensitized to know that at least they have to be receptive, they have to be supportive when these people return, because some of them are their relatives, some of them are their in-laws, some of them are their friends, some of them are their former peers, so they know they are coming and they are always prepared to receive and accept them.
Criteria for admittance is that the ex-combatants must be of Rwandan origin and must have voluntarily surrendered their weapons to the United Nations Organization Civilization Mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo, who then contact the center and arrange transportation.
The first phase of DDR is done by MONUSCO because they come here, they return back to Rwanda without weapon. Disarmament is done inside the Congo.
Muhira Emmanuel is one of the ex-combatants who ended up here at the center. He looks forward to life beyond.
I have a different dream. I only need to be my own business. I can't be study car, I can't be driver.
There are presently 27 ex-combatants at the center. Some came with their wives and children who are also victims. Of all the ex-combatants who have stayed at the center, only a small percentage ever returned to the life they lived before. From Mutombo in Musanze, Rwanda, Amarachi Ubani, Channel Television News.
We end the program in Zambia, which is on the front lines of the climate emergency, experiencing frequent droughts, floods and heat waves. The country is currently in the grips of the driest agricultural season in more than 40 years. Crops have been wiped out, livestock have died, and poverty and food insecurity are deepening.
Around 9.8 million people in 84 of Zambia's 166 districts are affected, and 6.6 million people in the country need immediate humanitarian assistance. The climate emergency is not gender neutral, and the most vulnerable women and girls who have contributed the least to the crisis are the most impacted. Zambia is no exception.
Today we are at Hakunkula village in Monze, southern province. So this particular village is about 30 kilometers from the nearest health center. So we are conducting a health outreach activity today, supported by UNFPA towards the drought response that is currently ongoing across the country.
In the drought-affected provinces of Southern, Western and Lusaka, acute malnutrition is high among pregnant and breastfeeding women. It's expected to worsen as the lean season begins next month. When food is scarce, women often eat last and least, sacrificing their own needs to feed their children. This situation poses an incredible risk to the health of mothers and their children in a country that already has one of the highest rates of malnutrition and stunting in sub-Saharan Africa.
In times of a crisis and in times of a drought like this, the health of women and girls, especially sexual and reproductive health, is not prioritized. Women may not prioritize going to the health facility in terms of a crisis of a drought like this, but instead would prioritize looking for food. So this has the possibility of impacting their health. So UNFPA is supporting Ministry of Health to conduct the mobile clinics, the health outreach activities, so that they can provide these services to women and girls, especially in this situation.
Risks of gender-based violence, sexual exploitation and abuse have all increased. Families are also resorting to desperate measures as they struggle to put food on the table. Girls are reported to be dropping out of school and being forcibly married. Zambia has some of the world's highest rates of children marriage, with close to a third of Zambian girls married off before the age of 18.
They don't have food. As a result, teenagers, they end up in they become vulnerable. So they engage themselves in sexual activities. So when we talk about HIV, even HIV rate, it's quite high in adolescents because they engage themselves to these fishermen because they want help, they are vulnerable.
UNFPA is appealing for $5.4 million to support this work. Immediate flexible funding is urgently needed to meet the needs of the most vulnerable women and girls.
Monze has about 43 health facilities. So in all those health facilities, currently UNFPA is providing support for mobile clinics such as this to be undertaken at least once every month for the coming 3 months. So this is where the situation comes in, where we need more support, we need more resources to be able to ensure that there's continuity of these mobile clinics across the next coming months. So we really need to ensure that we provide this necessary support. And as you can see from the outcome of the events here, there's really a need for these services.
UNFPA is also supporting 60 Safe Motherhood Action Group volunteers to provide information on safe motherhood to families, as well as 2 national toll-free lines that provide information on maternal health and gender-based violence services.
And that's the program today. But remember, our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelstv.com. Thank you for watching. I'm Teniola Oyetayo. Bye for now.